to the SPLC. Well, don't you think it's just a little bit interesting that all of these militia groups that are popping up are all right-wing groups? They're all Republicans generally, not all of them, but generally they're Republicans. And they faded away after 9/11. Who was in office for 8 years? Oh, George Bush, the hugest neocon on the face of the earth, poster boy for this. So, of course you don't see stories about militias popping up here and there with Bush in office. He's a Republican. He's Mr. gun-toting, balls-out Texan, or so he likes to pretend. Of course, those in the know he's nothing of the sort. But that's his act. That's what he portrays himself to be. So that's pretty interesting. Let's see. Here we go. It's easy to exaggerate the numbers of these groups or the threat they pose, especially if you are an organization like the SPLC, dedicated to exposing such things. Extremist outfits. Wait a minute. Let me read that one more time. It's easy to exaggerate the numbers of these groups or the threat they pose, especially if you are an organization like the SPLC dedicated to exposing such things. Okay. Extremist outfits have come and gone over the years, with their preening and prancing about in Nazi garb or white robes, skinheads and white supremacists. Oh, what did I call before? White supremacists. I believe I did, or did I say Nazis? One of the same difference. With their preening and prancing about in Nazi garb or white robes, skinheads and white supremacists are often more about showing off than committing acts of violence. Law enforcement experts worry more about lone wolves, disturbed loners with military training like Timothy McVeigh, the OKC bomber, than they do about loudmouth militia groups. But the feds and local authorities will be watching closely on April 19th when the Oath Keepers mark their first anniversary and join a Second Amendment march on Washington to celebrate the right to bear arms. The Oath Keepers say they are commemorating the first shots of the Revolutionary War fired at Lexington and Concord on April 19th, 1775. But April 19th is also the anniversary of the end of the FBI siege at Waco, Texas in 1993, as well as the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. This is what I think is interesting, personally, about this. They're commemorating, supposedly, the first shots fired at the Revolutionary War, Battle of Lexington and Concord, April 19th, 1775. I don't, they're making the references to the OKC bombing and Timothy McVeigh to get everybody's brain on, equate truthers with terrorists. That's what they want the head to do. However, I think it's interesting that the day that the Oath Keepers are commemorating are the shots fired in the Revolutionary War. That's kind of odd and spooky to me, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not attacking Oath Keepers. I like Oath Keepers generally. It's a good idea. I've read their philosophies on their webpage and such. For the most part, I agree with things that they're putting forth, but the implications of commemorating the first shots fired at the Battle of Lexington and Concord, with what's been happening lately, you see the Joe Stack incident connecting, whatever, I know he had government connections out the wazoo, but long story short, that was a false flag attack, and he was supposedly made some comments on a 9/11 blog website, and you have these other things now, that are coming out against the Tea Partiers, and they're starting to refer to the Tea Party people and the Truther people in the same context and depict them the same way. And now you have this thing here about, there's earlier the story about the militias, right, being formed, the Tea Party groups forming a militia. Now they're talking about Oath Keepers and commemorating the first shots of the Revolutionary War. Things are starting to kind of come together and almost look like, okay, let me go to FEMA camps here, and I'll connect it in a second. We have FEMA camps. We don't know exactly what they're for. We just know that KBR got $385 million under government contract to construct and renovate these camps. We know that. and we know that they don't spend that kind of money without a plan to use whatever they're building. We know that. And we know that they need an excuse to round us up, don't we? We know that. They need an excuse to round us up, put us in the camps, and, use the camps for something. We're not going to round up a bunch of chickens and put them in the camp. They're for people. Point being that they need an excuse to call martial law. And if there's an actual civil war in this country, that could give them reason to call martial law. And things are almost starting to, like, look, you got the Huttery group, the supposed, domestic terrorists, whatever. Look more into that for yourself. I'm not even going to spend all the time I should going into that right now because I don't have enough time to record this. I'm already over time. But the point is that with everything that's going on, it's almost like they're trying to incite, people to attack the government. Because, they can have all these provocateurs do it for a while, but eventually somebody who's not a provocateur, they're just an American who's had enough of the government's shit, basically, excuse me. But that's the truth. Eventually, I think what they're trying to do is get somebody who has legitimately just had enough, just been stepped on one too many times, at his house taken away from him, the government reasons, and yada yada, the whole nine, doesn't have a job, poor economy, the guy doesn't have a pot to piss in. That's gonna happen, and eventually one of these guys, who has no connection to anybody at all, so people like us aren't even gonna be able to point to, oh, false flag. No, they're gonna create false flags and incite, people that don't know to look into it necessarily, they don't know enough about this kind of thing, don't look into that, and they just see, and they think it's somebody like them. Oh, look, it's time. People are rising up. Like, time to do something. No. It's not time to do, not like that, it's not. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not trying to imply that Oath Keepers is a group that's trying to incite any of this. Not at all. If anything, they will be one of the victims in the media that's being used like this. And they're the good guys, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that this is what happens. Any spin that they can put on groups like this to make it look like they're involved in extremism or terrorism, and just the fact that, what they're doing, I just wonder if they've, thought this one out completely, and they know about, thought about the implications of what you're doing is, so, in a way, I mean, the article has a point when, in the beginning where it says, they might not be trying to incite a revolution, but what other people in it, and they want this. They want us to rise up, at least in part, so they can martial law, FEMA camps, bam, there you go. There's one region taken care of. Now, what's the next event for the next region, or whatever. Anyway, let's get back into this article. This is a season, or perhaps an era, when politics seems more intense than usual, and the domestic extremist threat seems more real. Partisan disputes are rarely pretty, but lately they have taken a particularly ugly, menacing turn. Last week, FBI arrested individuals for making death threats against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Patty Murray of Washington for their votes on health care reform. Oh, okay, so now people are making death threats. Well, they get death threats all the time, I'm sure. They're politicians. Let's see here. Skip ahead a couple paragraphs here. There's not much in there. Economic distress and social change make for fear, and fear makes for anger, now and always. Night riders terrorized the defenseless after the Civil War. During the Great Depression, two demagogues in particular whipped up conspiracy theories against Jewish bankers and the rich elites to arouse angry mass movements. Huey Long, governor of Louisiana, later a U.S. senator who wanted to soak the rich, and Father Charles Coughlin, an anti-Semitic Catholic priest whose radio show reached 40 million people, seemed a political threat to FDR until Long was assassinated and Coughlin became increasingly unhinged. There was a lot of hatred in the 1930s, says Alan Brinkley, the Columbia University historian and expert on populist movements, but the current stage of fear and loathing towards Obama is scary. There is a big dose of race behind the real crazies, the ones who take their guns to public meetings. The ones who take their guns to public meetings are the crazies. So now you want to express the open carry, and you want to express your, right to bear arms, now you're crazy for taking a gun to a meeting. No, sir, not the crazy.